panel now about future-proofing your data governance. Who gets excited about governance? All right, I usually don't see as many hands go up. I love this topic. This is the unsung hero topic of people analytics, governance, and what it entails, how to build it. We're going to get deep on this. I am going to moderate and participate a bit, but I'm excited to introduce two rock stars to you. Esther Farr, who's the Director of People Analytics and Tech at Meridian Credit Union, and Javier Cuervo, who we heard from this morning, who's the MD and Head of PA at ATB Financial. So let's hear it for them.
Are we sitting?
I think you can sit wherever you like.
Okay.
Yeah. As Javier is getting mic'd up, show of hands, who has a dedicated governance person or team in their HR organization? Okay, and show of hands, who borrows governance capability tools from other parts of the organization, perhaps at the enterprise level? Yeah. Something that we talked about when we were prepping was the strategy that organizations have to implement effective governance, practical application of it, how it actually shows up in day-to-day workflows, and then of course, if you heard me this morning, you won't be surprised to hear that we also talked about AI in the context of governance, so we'll be talking about that as well. So let me kick off with a quick definition. At Icona, we analyze data capabilities across 4 segments: governance, infrastructure, methods to create insight, and products to ship insights to customers. And governance is a foundational layer that we look at, and we define it as programmatic mechanisms and tools to define, acquire, and ethically manage data, access to data, and in ways that are intentionally designed on principles that safeguard employee trust. It's a mouthful, but we're hitting on a couple of things there: how you manage data, how you acquire it, how you safeguard it, how you ship it for decision making. That's a tricky balance sometimes. So with that in mind, Esther, maybe I can start with you. Why don't you just give us an overview about your governance program? How do you make sure that those different components are fit for purpose within your org?
Great. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah.
So I work for Meridian Credit Union. We're Ontario's largest credit union, strategically placed sort of as an alternative to big banks. And the reason why I say that is because all of our members are owners and all of our employees are members. So we really are member-centric and employee-centric. And for me, that's where the component of trust really comes in from a governance perspective. We want to make sure our members' data is protected and used appropriately, and we want to do the same thing with our employee data. So we're partnering really closely with our enterprise data analytics and governance team to make sure that we can align to that overall strategy for trust and for long-term success.
Excellent. Javier, can you give us a sense of how you think about governance?
Yeah, at ATB we are a Crown Corporation. We are a bank, a regional bank, only servicing Alberta on the retail side. And I think unlike being a members-led and owned organization, we do have clients, and employees may or may not be clients. We do have, though, a very strong governance team at the enterprise level. And what we have done is that within the organization, we have different streams of data ownership. And in particular, employee data and the owner of employee data at the enterprise level. So in that way, yes, we are aligned with the enterprise, but I have enough autonomy to dictate what best practices would be within the realm of employee data.
Right. What are some of the capabilities that you both lean on heavily within your governance programs? There's data quality, there's cataloging, there's having defect remediation and identification within your org. Are there certain capabilities that you look to and lean on more than others, and maybe some capabilities that you're working towards?
Yeah, certainly. There is all the verticals that you mentioned. We are doing something about it in each of them. We are at different levels of maturity. I think if I trust the scorecards. Where we are the strongest is on metadata. So every time that we put data either in the enterprise data lake, which is not much of HR, or that we start a new data set, we use tools like Colibra to capture definitions and usage. Data quality would be probably on the other side of the spectrum in maturity. It's still trying to understand how to measure in a way that makes sense at the enterprise and at the HR level, but more importantly, finding the mechanisms that you can actually influence the data production, so you get to better data quality.
Esther, how does that show up in your org?
So we're very early on in our evolution, but I can say from a guiding principles perspective, I lead our technology and our analytics team. So to Javier's point about data quality and understanding the inputs, so the systems, the processes, the people who are creating these assets that we have, to me that's really important, because if we can get a common understanding of basic terms, when do we put in this value versus another value, and those downstream impacts to our core systems, but then also the other systems that are then integrated with those core systems. Sort of seeing that full picture as an ecosystem is key for me.
Yeah. So having a strategy with component parts at different maybe stages of maturity is what we're hearing here. And having a strategy is necessary, and when a strategy makes contact with the day-to-day operations and processes and transactions in a company, sometimes that strategy does not survive contact with day-to-day operations. Something that we see a lot of is when you take an enterprise-wide, kind of a cross-COE, process-wide view on data, you're often spanning different parts of the HR organization. And I'll ask the audience to raise your hand if the dividing lines of your org chart, have they ever created data silos in your org? This is a loaded question, by the way. Yeah. I want to ask Javier and Esther, how have you seen that show up within your org? Do you see a little bit of attention in your objectives from a governance standpoint to be enterprise-wide, and the design of the org perhaps making your job a little harder by virtue of creating silos?
Great question, Ian.
Yeah.
So silos are happening both within people and culture, but also more broadly within the organization. And I think what we end up seeing on the analytics side are terminology silos.
Right.
So has anyone ever asked you for headcount? And you're wondering, do you want FTE? Do you, what's your definition of headcount? Because I have a definition. Something just as simple as that.
Can we just, I need to see. Who has this battle with finance, HR and finance? How do we count? Look at these hands. This is incredible. It's the age-old debate. Yes. So yeah, please.
Yeah. So reconciling those terminologies. We have departments and we have functions. We kind of know what it means when somebody starts a new function, but we could get better at aligning those definitions. So those are really, really basic things. But then the silos also happen in our systems, and those systems are creating data. I'd like to say I know the system of record for our job requisitions, for example, but I bet you there's some spreadsheet somewhere where someone else is tracking approved requisitions before they go into our system, as example. So I think really having the enterprise-wide data governance strategy helps us translate some of those inconsistencies that we're seeing in our data.
Yeah. Just a note about the FTE definition. I'm happy to report that we won that battle with finance. We've been using our definition
That's
for
it, we're
4
going
years.
home. The conference is over.
I'd like to talk to you later.
Yeah. Yes. So besides FTE definitions and with respect to data silos, I'm a little bit in a good position as being the data owner at the enterprise level of employee data, that I have, one, the autonomy, two, the accountability to kind of drive those decisions. So, and we are jumping into the data lake, enterprise data lake, in a very commensurate way. We choose what we put in there, and when we enable the data to other functions, it comes with literally a data usage agreement, in which then we try to make sure to keep track of who has for what and for how long they will have access to that data. In terms of the silos, the data silos within HR, same thing. Like every system is creating their own data pipeline, and we are doing our best to keep abreast with it and bring it to our little data warehouse and make sure that we have governance around that.
For those in the audience that might be getting started or underway with their governance programs, have you seen, both of you in your orgs, when there's data mismatches or definitional inconsistencies, do you find that after the fact? Can you spot that ahead of time? Is it both, and depending on the situation? How does that typically play out in your org?
Yeah, I think it's both.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you see from miles away that it's going to happen and you try to stop the train.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, that was...
Right. Something landed in a report, it's like, that's wrong,
Yeah.
we need to go.
And the issue is, like earlier this morning I was talking about trust, and trust is also the data, right? Like the moment that a report says, just to go back to FTE, there is this many people here, and your report says this is different, that creates an issue, right? So examples of things that we have done is we limit the frequency at which the data is refreshed, and we have a strict schedule for when things that are going to dashboards can be pulled. So in that way, at least we can rule out, well, it's not the day that you pull the data that you're getting 3 more people. Has to be something else. So there are certain things that you can, or that we have done, that help alleviate that. And with the definitions, I said, like, we won the battle with finance.
Yes.
That's just one battle. There are like 5 other business units that we still have to win that battle.
Keep fighting the fight, my friend.
Yeah.
Esther, do you have a story to share on seeing the train a mile away or reacting to something after the fact?
It's related. So I think one of the challenges that keeps popping up is around future dating and backdating and transaction dates. I hear noises, so yes. And I think the approach that I've taken in the past has been valuing the truth as we know it today, but also being very prepared to explain in detail to the doubter who wants you to explain that one tiny transaction that happened to pop up for last quarter. Because to me, one tiny transaction that got backdated overall isn't substantive, but people want to find reasons to doubt what they're looking at. So if we can quickly explain it away, we understand exactly what happened, there might even be a little footnote in there, then we can move on and have a real conversation about the numbers.
We would, at Amazon, we would call it the Where's Bob problem. Like, we have a Where's Bob problem. There's a report, there's 100 rows on it. This month and next month there's 99. Like, where's Bob? I don't trust this anymore. And so the drilling into that, it's not to explain it away, but in those examples you tend to kind of get into the minutia and find out that certain HRBPs are retroactively backdating termination transactions, and Bob disappeared. On the report, the record is still there, and we lost trust, but then you regain it by drilling in and qualifying the data. It's not perfect, right? And the processes aren't either. So just kind of going a little further on this, the practical application of governance. When we were prepping, Javier, you brought up an interesting paradox of sorts, right? That governance programs, I think, often, not in this room, which was great to see, but often can get an eye roll and like you're going to slow us down. The governance team is coming. But the paradox is that we need to democratize data to accelerate speed of decision making, but do it in a way that's ethical, that's kind of on the guardrails and not off the rails, on the wrong side of privacy and compliance. So how do you balance that paradox, speed of decision-making and innovation with kind of safe democratization of data?
Yeah, like it's been a learning experience.
Yeah.
Getting into the job and being the responsibility of being the data owner, and it's like, okay, I need to hoard all this. But quickly you realize that you don't do anything with the data only by yourself. You need to start opening it up. And that's where, for example, the data user agreements came to be. Like that was something that we were using already for the users of the enterprise data lake, but then we adapted it to the users of the HR data. At the end of the day, we are leveraging existing mechanisms, in particular also the trust that we have in our team members and that they will adhere to the code of conduct. At the end of the day, if you have a reason for, because of the job or the function that you are doing, to see this data, it is within my purview to decide whether or not, which is not necessarily scalable, and obviously I'm gonna make judgment mistakes at some point, but at least we have those guardrails. Right now I'm more of the view, and this again, it has evolved, of, yeah, I used to be like, no, now I'm more like, okay, tell me more, and tell me more, and tell me more. I still may say no, but I'm way more open now to open the data. And it does take a little bit of a change for the team as well, because I role model in a way, no, we are keeping the data. So now their first reaction is to do that as well. Now is start playing the role of, okay, let's be more curious, let's understand the business problem, and if it's something that we cannot do in-house for whatever reason, but we can enable it in the business, let's explore how we do it in a responsible way.
Right. Let's be curious, but also let's be courageous in a way, because at some point, both of you have probably had to look at how we're sharing data or how we're not sharing data. And if I had to guess, orgs rarely are perfectly consistent every time on the first pass with, here's how we share data across the organization. A lot of times, we just haven't made up our mind about how we feel sharing certain types of data with certain people in certain roles. And it comes down to who's asking, who's making noise, who really needs it. Do you see this in your orgs? Is it a change, sort of a leadership path that you have to take to tackle that? What do you think, Esther?
I think we're still pretty early on in our enterprise governance journey, where right now for me, the answer is usually a pretty firm no, unless it's IT provisioning and we can sort of identify exactly what's needed. If it's for an analytics purpose, we tend to keep the people data within the people and culture area. That's not to say that once we've sort of progressed on our journey, we have some mechanisms for de-identification, we have some agreements in place, then we could move there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Where that gets tricky in our experience is when you have some guardrails and some guiding principles centrally, right? And that will cover a majority of use cases and data use. And then there will be, it takes one, and one a week is enough to give you a migraine, but it'll take one HR line leader in the field who needs access to certain data because they just got out of a staff meeting with, big boss ABC of this business, but they're not provisioned to see that. How do you make those calls? How do you look at that? Is it case by case? It's just hand-to-hand combat, or do you look at the principles that we have and on how we're making decisions as an evolving sort of a mental model, as it were? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it should be a matter of principles. It's more about the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. And again, but on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
We don't, I don't know if I mentioned it right at the moment or it was this morning, we only have a few data sets that don't have any confidential information or protected, like I think at most is protected B data in the data lake. Everyone else is we have control. I like if it was mine. We have control of who sees the data. And there are certainly things that HR, that as a HR leadership team, we are very wary of ever putting it in the lake, because it's not so much who is ingesting the data. Do they have a business case to just, because of the injection process being private to that data? Sometimes it's hard to tell, or hard to say yes to that. So because of that, we have it that way. But I tend to be more about the spirit of the law on a case-by-case basis.
In a way, I think it comes down to how end users who would need access to data, they're in roles, they have a spot in the org chart, they're at a certain level. There's kind of characteristics that you have on these individuals. And in a way, it can come down to how do we codify trust and then map it into a way to allow or disallow Javier or Esther from having access to certain data. And you both are doing versions of that, but it's not perfect. And you have to be flexible to maybe re-examining that. If I'm not putting words in your mouth, Javier, tell me. But
no, absolutely. And I think that rethinking of the process is the important part, right? Like, we are both at the enterprise level, like the governance is also maturing and evolving, and we are just tagging along. It does help to have a framework to follow.
Yes.
I don't have to make things up out of a whim. It's that makes my job easier in that way.
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. I think when we're talking about people data specifically, I know everyone thinks that their data is unique, but people data is really unique. And so if you are sharing it outside of an HR or people and culture organization, the people who are receiving it may not even be aware of some of the expectations around retention. Like, it's different retention policies that we're applying. It's different privacy. There's different employment law expectations. And so I think sort of throwing it over the fence isn't an option. It really has to be a partnership and a lot of education around the stewardship of that data.
True, well said. And can that swing a little too far on the side of holding up privacy? I can't share anything. Like,
right.
So there's somewhere in the middle there that we have to be flexible to putting some high judgment to, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And this is on data that we know that exists, that we deal in every day, right? I want to switch and talk about data that's maybe entering into the ecosystem and not yet part of your data model through AI and generative AI. So how does the emergence of language models, for instance, the ability to create new data, what does it do to your governance philosophy, to your program? How are you thinking about AI and governance in the new age of generative AI?
Yeah, it's been, you wanna take
No,
that?
go ahead.
Okay, sorry. It's been really interesting in this last year. In November, we adopted enterprise-wide Gemini. We are a Google shop, so everyone in the organization has access to Gemini. And it was a lot of work to get to that decision. At the same time, like every other system that we have is implementing generative AI features. And IT, even though this is kind of an enterprise governance issue, there is just two people looking at those things. And literally every single one of them will have some sort of thing. So we are trying to federate that decision into the business. We are creating a framework, a risk-based framework that hopefully will allow the owners of the tools to make certain level of decisions in turning that feature on or not. We develop another general user agreement for generative AI that the whole organization have to sign. We have, I think, 98% or 92% of coverage with that. And right now it's an experimentation. Like we are starting very tight and see how we make, again, the paradox, like how do you stay safe but don't stifle innovation?
So Javier, if we asked the ATB Gemini what the definition of headcount is, what would it say? Would it be yours?
I
or-
won't try.
Esther?
Can I add to that
Yeah,
one?
please, by all means.
So I would just say the way I've been approaching it is
Yeah.
that I see, depends on the type of Gen AI. If we're looking at sort of an interactive chat solution or an LLM or something that's generating new content, what it's looking at matters, and because it's going to amplify whatever's there. So if it's looking at your policies and those policies haven't been updated in 10 years, it won't know to update those policies. It won't know what's wrong about those policies. So for me, I think there's a lot of power in it, and that's where the governance piece comes in, where your metadata, your reviewing things and updating them are actually going to really help to make sure that if you do implement one of these solutions, it's reliable.
Right. This morning we heard a couple speakers talk about configuring and building architecture working backwards from like the outcomes you seek and not necessarily just building forward based on what's possible in the tech. So completely possible to experiment and pilot with generative AI in a way that is very, very guarded and doesn't look externally and only hallucinates on internal information. But it's an experimentation. I don't think anyone's figured out the silver bullet or cracked the pattern, right? Would you say? Yeah.
I haven't.
We are just dabbling into it. We have a couple of projects using the Gemini models to try to understand alignment in between OKRs and business
Right.
cases and business operating plan. Still early to say how that's going to work.
Show of hands in the audience. Raise your hand if your org has figured out the right type of infrastructure design and governance implementation pattern for generative AI. If you raise your hand, I definitely want to talk to you afterwards. But that is actually where I want to jump off. So we talked about strategy. We talked about having your strategy survive contact, so to speak, with day-to-day operations in terms of application, how AI is evolving our views on governance. And we have 1 minute and 30 seconds left, which we might be able to stretch to 3. But if anyone has questions for our esteemed panelists, please raise your hand. But otherwise, let's give a round of applause for Esther and Javier. Who's got a question? Oh, on the far side.
So I have a question about data autonomization. How does that play into getting the HR data to work with the data lake? In Canada, we're looking at a lot of data destruction and data autonomization to be able to fit a lot of the legislation that's coming in. Have you seen that? Just to be able to autonomize the data in a way that some components can still be used to fit in the data lake, or not yet?
So one of the requirements that we have put to IT in order to be able to upload more data is row-level security, right? Like it's easier to mask column-wise. I don't know if I'm speaking in a language that makes sense to most people. So you can mask for everyone their salary. It's much harder to do to mask the salary of the people that don't report to you. So that's what is row-level security. So that's a non-negotiable for us, for the IT infrastructure to be able to provide that. And we went, and this is where partnership with your data governance team and with your IT team is important, because the conversation moved from, we need you in the lake, them to me, to, oh, what do you need us to do so you can be in the lake? Mm-hmm. So that, and is that evolution of their maturity process too, to understand why HR data is actually different? When you tell them, well, would you like your employees to know your salary? They're like, oh yeah, maybe not. Then that changes the conversation.
Excellent. Well, we're a little over time, but again, I want to thank Esther and Javier for their insights and thoughts, and let's just give them another round of applause.
Thank you.